Shit! I've been shot! I don't fucking believe this. Could everyone stop getting shot? Everyone stop getting shot!
Well, hello everyone. We have a very special episode here, not just because we're going to talk about the 18th certificate, but we also have a special guest on board. His name is Nick Prosser, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yep, that's right.
We have our usual Rob Bavister, as always, and me, Mark Skinny Media. And Nick, just for anyone who's a bit curious, I actually met him at a British Film Institute Mixer and Social, and we were talking about disconcerting films that somehow messed with our mind. Watching it when we were growing up. For me, I put Da Vinci Code because it's always been a punchline for anyone who's watched the podcast series that, oh no, he freaks out of the whipping scene. For you, Nick, what was it?
Well, I put down Climax, but I was after about a good 5 minutes of deliberation of what metric I was judging it on, because the prompt was your discomfort movies. Like, is this the one I find most discomfortable, or the one I like the most but is uncomfortable? Or so I went through so many different choices. I went for Climax because it's my favourite Gaspar Noé film, and for me, he represents sort of the pinnacle of uncomfortable films that are still very interesting and have lots to dive into about them.
Well, I totally agree with that. I mean, from my experience, I can speak on Gaspar Noé because all of his films, except for Vortex and Luxatana, 18th Certificate and Love and Irreversible, are the two films that come to mind that really you should never show to anyone. I actually saw those at the Cinematheque in Nice, France, weirdly enough. Only €2 per ticket. That's about £1.70.
The bargain. When was that?
Actually, it was earlier this year, like sometime around May and June. It was because I was there for Cannes. I thought, oh, might as well go see Love and Irreversible on the big screen because I never had the option to. Irreversible, I was too young to see, and in Love, they didn't play it in my area. So I had the chance to see hardcore porno as well as a really horrible film of sexual assault and a man being his face extinguished with a fire extinguisher. Very, very graphic. I wouldn't show it to anyone.
Sounds like a lovely afternoon.
On Netflix last night, I watched A History of Violence.
That's one of my favourite Cronenberg films.
Yeah. I know there was a difference between the American version, which was cut for an R rating, and the version that was released internationally, which was apparently just the uncut version. However, to be honest, there is no notable difference that you wouldn't really that you would notably pick up on between the two versions. I do not know what the point was.
I mean, I saw both versions myself, and I thought the main differences were very trivial. It was mainly just like bloodletting coming from the nose and the mouth. I've seen much worse in other rated R films, and that's even not accounting the is it rape, is it a sex scene moment on the stairs. Yeah,
that's a bit here or there. I'm surprised the MPAA didn't come down hard on that because they don't like that stuff, do they? Well, they don't like sex in general, but I mean, like, there's a very aggressive sex scene, which they are not cool with, generally speaking.
No, not really. And then that's one scene where a man's, is shot in the face, and you see quite gory detail. And another scene of 69ing.
I don't remember the 69ing scene.
Different versions.
69 is code for oral sex between both partners.
I know what it is, for God's sake. I don't remember. It's in the freaking in the film. Or did I miss something? Oh fuck! Well, I don't care.
Nevertheless,
anyway, on a subject of films that traumatized me growing up, if you are interested, Nick, Mark knows this quite well. But for me, it's RoboCop.
Oh yeah, how young were you?
5 to the best of my memory.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
It was just a Murphy's death scene.
Yeah, it's. I feel like RoboCop's one of those films that, to like a non-discerning adult, might look like it's the kind of like just sort of sci-fi romp that a kid, if they sort of happen to not notice the 18 rating, because like, oh yeah, robots, cops, cool, let's go. And then it's it's almost surprising just how far to go with it. Of course, to match in with all the thematics of it. Yeah, Murphy's Destiny in particular.
And that was
I
because
lose count how many
R-rated
gunshots.
version.
Yeah.
Well, they hurt R-rated. To say nothing about the director's cut version, which is the MPAA in America gave and what was then an X rating for. So you see the 18 rating in RoboCop. This isn't just like some 18 that was just only 18 because of when it came out and hasn't been resubmitted, so hasn't been downgraded yet. This was retaining its 18. It's not like Terminator or Alien, which has long since been downgraded. And any 18 you see in any copy of it is just an anachronism now.
Yeah.
No, that one still retains it.
Yeah. After all these years, and it's definitely still has its power to shock.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way it's kind of a goofy scene. I mean, some parts of it, but one thing else that I've always said, and Mark's probably getting bored hearing me talk about this and everything, but it's the sadism of the scene, because the way they're all laughing and everything, especially what that funny boy, his name was, who has that laughing hyena laugh, and it's just like, oh. I mean, I can watch it now and everything, because you don't take it too seriously. But as a kid, it doesn't look too well. Fortunately, my brother and his mates who were watching it with me helped me through it and everything, so I could contextualize it. Okay, he's going to become RoboCop, and then he's going to start killing these bad guys in revenge. Because another film I saw like that also when I was quite young was Darkman. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think I've heard of Darkman.
Oh,
and wait, is that the comic adaptation?
It's not a comic, actually. It's a completely original. It stars Liam Neeson and Larry Drake, and I don't know who else. It's basically RoboCop with superheroes, in the same way that The Crow is RoboCop for goths. But yeah, a guy gets killed by criminals and gets resurrected with superpowers and goes around killing them all. And of course, his death scene can be a little bit sadistic and everything as well. But that has been downgraded to a 15. But actually, when you watch a film, the violence is pretty minimal.
But that's the thing about with RoboCop is, of course, the brutality, as you said, the sort of that kind of sort of overkill of Murphy. A lot of the time when it comes to 18s, it's not necessarily just the bloodletting that's on the screen, but actually sort of the intent of the violence and sort of like its sadism, and sort of if it has that sort of prolonged sort of overly sadistic and sort of reveling violence, it sort of pushes over,
sadistic. It is sadistic violence. If it dwells on the infliction of pain and or injury, they say, which I suppose I could sort of see that, although there are some decisions they make you think, well, how have you made that decision? But with this film, you made this decision and everything. But but of course, like, I mean, RoboCop, and the violence is very on screen and uses a lot of it, whereas a lot of films back then, you're surprised at how actually tame they are.
Yeah.
Such as Terminator and Alien and Aliens. It's like you really don't see a lot of detail, and it's surprise, and it just gave an idea of just how overly heavy-handed Thurman was.
Which, of course, then the whole problem with having, of course, there's not really a better way of doing it necessarily, but the idea of having a subjective decision made on whether a film's content, trying to squeeze a very difficult, complex subject into one of 5 age categories, and completely at the whim of whoever happens to be marking it on that day and what mood they're in, as far as I can tell.
What's the thing though? We got 5 ratings now, but that's because the ratings over time have increased. When the BBFC started out over 100 years ago, they just had 2. It was like every film had to be broken. Those had to be like just compartmentalized. Well, the ones they didn't just outright ban or censor the shit out of. They'd be just confined to those 2. Then they said, okay, we'll have an H category, then we change to X. So we've got 3 ratings. But then, of course, America starts its rating system with 4, G, M originally, R and X. It was like, well, hang on a second, both R and X films are going to get rated X over here, so they needed the AA, so we got 4. But then, of course, America go and invent their PG-13 rating, which, of course, the Hollywood just wants to make shit ton of. So, of course, like, okay, we've got to create a 12 rating, but they made that completely wrong because they didn't realize a lot of these things are going to be aimed at younger audiences. So, did 12A. And there's some countries have like 6 ratings. I think Brazil does. It goes like a U and a P, the G, PG, whatever it is. And it goes 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Actually, no, wait. That might be 7 ratings. But yeah. But, I mean, some countries do have more than 5 ratings, but I mean, it does kind of help compartmentalize a bit. But sometimes I think our rating system has to just follow what America's does because everyone's making the movies. But I've said that enough times on our previous podcast.
Yeah, I suppose it makes it easier when it comes over to BBFC. If the MPAA have already had their say, it gives them a sort of a guidance of roughly what they should be, what they think they're going to come out with at the end, I suppose. How
Well,
often they follow that.
I have made that comment so many times. I mean, the films Die Hard 4 and Once Upon a Deadpool, which were heavily sanitized to get these PG-13 ratings, and yet the BBFC rated them 15 anyway. It's just like, what are you doing? But that's not really the topic we're talking about.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, the 18 is the focus of the conversation, but you know, everyone likes to have their foundations from when it all began. I mean, you know, my experience with the 18 is probably a lot more restrictive than you fellas, mainly because I didn't see like RoboCop or Pulp Fiction or films like that until I was much older. You know, I didn't start watching my first 15 films first 18 films until I was more or less 15 myself. But before I get into that, I will bring up one topic that is quite pertinent going on right now, and that's the Online Safety Act. My opinion on it is, well, it would have helped out, you know, stop the rioting in question, but it can be used to weaponize against perhaps progressive groups who feel like, okay, we're going to march for human rights or Palestine or Black Lives Matter or anti-capitalism. It could be used even more to weaponize against them than it is for the far right. Your thoughts on Ofcom trying to go heavy-handed on Online Safety Act?
Well, just to catch up with the audience, shall we do a quick summary of what the Online Safety Act maybe is intending to do versus what might actually be the effect of it?
Well, it's to crack down on hate speech and posts that are based on misinformation, but it's more or less, that's a tricky test to follow. You have to be sort of like trigger words that involve like kill, rape, torture, or some sort of ethnic or racial slur. And that would, you know, rely on the social media service vetting via algorithm to say, okay, this person said that, we've got to flag them. But that test is becoming a lot harder these days because most of these social media companies are profiteering on the rage bait, they call it. I don't know all the internet terms, but these fellas do.
That's the term. Flame bait, rage bait, just bait in general.
Yeah. But the problem is,
And
that,
ever since-
again, sorry.
I was going to say, ever since Elon Musk took over Twitter, or X as he now calls it, but I'm not calling it that.
No.
The situation has just got worse because he's just let all the wrong uns out of their cages. But that's just my toes. Over to you, Nick.
Well, I was going to say, and again, we have a system that presumably to someone looks good on paper, but it's trying to take something rather subjective and try and apply an objective filter to it by filtering out keywords and essentially flagging people for using them or not is a very binary approach and removes any nuance from why people might be using words such as kill or hate or anything else. Not to mention it just pushes people to use pseudonyms like unalive, which is now quite frequent to find online to get around YouTube and TikTok censorship, I believe it is.
Told you, Mark.
Yeah.
My documentary was banned because it had graphic images of suicide and dead bodies. I was making a satirical point, but they didn't get it.
And that's the issue, is that any kind of any nuance, any intention is lost when you look at just the sort of the actual, you know, what the words used or the images used, and trying to put that through an algorithm. The algorithm can't tell, you know, the worthiness of having used it, what the context is, and therefore it just doesn't work as a system.
Well, yeah, and of course they use ED for eating disorder, SA for sexual assault, grape for rape, corn for porn, because they don't want their stuff to be. Well, that's just to get through YouTube's demonetization. But then again, that's just like that's just a company's policy and everything. That's nothing to do with government censorship. I mean, I know of mixed things about them. Well, from what I know about it, I don't know about it. I don't really like it when the government starts doing illiberal things, and this does look like it. I mean, you remember that case back in 2018 where that Mark Meechan guy, aka Countdown Killer, as he calls himself, got arrested for that video where he got the pug to do a Nazi salute, and he said to unalive the Jews, gas the Jews, basically.
I don't think I saw that, but so what happened to him? He got arrested.
He got arrested. He's up in Scotland. They had, I don't know if it might be one of their hate crime laws playing down here, but I think it was a 2003 Communications Act and everything. He didn't go to jail. I think he got fined. But of course, I mean, I don't like the guy because he is a complete alt-right cunt, and he hangs around the likes of Carl Benjamin and the UKIP crowd. And I don't believe he said he was like mocking Nazis was doing it. I don't think for a second he was. I do actually believe he was actually making racist anti-Semitic jokes. But at the same time, I really don't think you should go to jail just for a YouTube video. That does sound like the kind of thing Putin would do.
The problem is it establishes the precedent, whether the initial occurrence was justified or not. Once we have that precedent, people being arrested for essentially saying something online or making a video online, it opens that doorway up for people to be arrested for any dissenting opinion, whether that's pro or anti, government values.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't help. Like, some people say, well, hang on, if that person got arrested for that thing, then that person should be arrested for that thing. And of course, I mean, some people, I do sort of worry people might try to weaponize it for their own degrees. And of course, this is like a bigger, because obviously we're talking about BBFC here. Of course, they've been at the forefront of things of free speech issues. And of course, when I talk about a government trying to do things online, I worry, are you going to try and censor porn and everything? Because I am not cool with that. But of course, I had to deal with a stupid bloody Video Recordings Act back in the 80s, which of course now means nothing that's released on video can be released unrated, which isn't so bad now, but back then was real hell.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what you said about the government blocking porn, do you remember there was actually an act they tried to pass around I think it was 2019?
Yes. They tried to pass it, but yes, I remember. Yeah. Alarm bells went off in my head when I see that. I was saying to myself, well, this is what happens when you elect a Tory government, and they fortunately didn't get it through, which is, was made me a happy chappy, but
yeah, because I remember I wrote about this at uni because I ended up writing a blog about internet censorship for one of my coursework things, which happened to be at pretty much the time this was all going on, which was crazy to me. What I realised was if it had gone through, we'd be the only country in the world that had an official government-sanctioned block on porn, which is crazy when you think about some of the other countries in there with much more sort of conservative views on sort of sexual media, that we'd be the ones to sort of start out on that. But it's a crazy, and of course, this is the other thing with censorship, is if you start blocking certain types of content, it doesn't do anything to actually curb the usage of that content, or does it just push it underground and make it, worse, probably more dangerous to access, more damaging and unregulated, which I don't think is at all what they want, and presumably, hopefully, why they sort of cancelled the bill before it got through. But hopefully someone points out to them.
Well, one would hope so. I mean, I can't, like I've said, I mean, like in terms of, I can't imagine, there must have been like there's probably been a big pirate video industry in this market in this country. And I can't help thinking about during the 80s and everything in the 90s when, the Video Recordings Act came in, and of course, Furman was just really heavy-handed with his attitude towards videos. Yeah, a lot of the things he just refused to classify in video must have just got released on pirate video. Because, well, that's what happens.
Yeah, and you get things like Clockwork Orange. Well, after that was banned, there were shops in France that basically specialised in selling UK-friendly Clockwork Orange tapes, and there was a whole cottage industry of people going over to Paris or wherever it was in France, and just to buy these tapes and coming back again. It was just a common occurrence. It's all what happens if you ban stuff. People just find a way around it.
Well, that's what happened.
Clockwork Orange wasn't actually banned. It was just Stanley Kubrick withdrew that from distribution. But I mean, you get things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Exorcist, which was banned on video but not the cinema because consistency and everything. But yeah, what you said, Nick.
Well, I wanted to interject there about Clockwork Orange and another film, Natural Born Killers. My father had to watch it when he was in the US and get the copy there. So that's how it happened. I always thought that was a bit weird for stars until I realized, read the history a little bit. But when I saw the promos for Clockwork Orange back in 1999 and 2000, I thought, what is this dangerous movie you're not supposed to see? So even as early as that, I picked up something was a little bit not right going on here. And that was, well, weirdly enough, I would argue 1999 was probably the year my film censorship nerdiness sort of kicked into high gear, and I think a lot of it had to do with Southport, Bigger, Long, and Uncut. That was, that's a 15, so I can't bring that one up, but I can bring up Perfect Blue,
Dude,
which is an 18 rated animation.
Dude, you were 6 years old in 1999. Just how the hell were you thinking about that stuff at 6 years old? All I was thinking about when I was 6 was basically what time, I don't know, Ninja Turtles or Hero Turtles was on or anything.
I was an advanced child at my time. I was obsessed with film ratings. I had maybe a bit of a libido. I had a girlfriend, and then I watched Aladdin, the Jasmine scene, too many times. And I knew about all these car brands, and I wanted to drive a Volvo back in the early 2000s and late 90s. And I talked about politics. I'm not like most people.
Well, I don't know about it, but I've certainly noticed that, Mark. I think a lot of people have.
But I've kind of thrive on that. I mean, that's why I do these podcasts, because there's not only a vehicle for me to go on about people being whipped and some mutant anime girl killing people with telekinesis, but it's another excuse for me to talk about my paranoias, traumas, fetishes, and amusements. And I think the 18 certificate is one more or less for me that was shrouded in mystery because, like unlike you fellas, I didn't really get to see many of them growing up. I mean, the first one I would argue I saw was like this film is not yet rated, and then Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then Afro Samurai. Those were the first 318 works I ever saw, by the way.
That's another one that is clearly overdue for a down rating. I mean, if Snatch could get downgraded to a 15, Lockstock is clearly in that category too.
I believe that.
I mean, should we start with the, get on to, where should we start? We're talking about the 18 rating.
Well, I mean, you could start with your experience, but I know you mentioned RoboCop, seeing it at a young age, but you could expand on it if you want to, and then Nick can follow as well. Whichever you fellas want to decide.
I think I've said my piece more than a few times about RoboCop. Yes, I did see it at a very young age. Yes, it was violent. I probably wouldn't suggest that little kids do watch films like that. I mean, I'm just thinking what other 18 rated films I saw at a young age. I mean, yeah, I saw Darkman and Terminator when I was very young, but again, those were only 18s on a technicality and everything and aren't 18s anymore. Of course, one of the things I remember actually was the Bottom was the first live edition of Bottom, which had an 18, because I used to watch the TV show, of course, a lot as a kid, as you know, and really enjoyed it. And of course, when they had a live one, I really wanted to watch it. But of course, because it was 18 rated, because again, just because standards back then, they used stronger language, which got an 18, but I don't think it would cost now. I wasn't allowed to watch it. I was really miffed about that. To be fair, I mean, there's a lot of I'm just trying to think what else can go on. Which is probably a lot to go into. Having a bit more experience. I mean, I'll step back now and I'll hand the floor to Nick now to give his 2 cents.
Nick, are you still there? Hello? No, I think we kind of lost him. I hope he's all right.
Hello? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I
we
think my
didn't.
network
Sorry, we
switched
didn't.
over.
Did you? Yeah, I was going to hand the floor to you. I don't know if you caught what my diatribe or anything, Nick, but I was going to hand the floor to you to give your 2 cents on the
Well, his
topic at
early
hand.
experience with the 18. I mean, he's younger than both of us, me and Rob. But I'm sure maybe his first 18 may have been like.
Yeah, well,
I'm not so sure.
I was trying to think when as far as I can remember, the first 18 I saw was Alien, even though I think it was probably downrated by then, because I know. So let me think. I saw Alien when I was 13, and that would have been in 2011.
Yeah, that would have been. Do you mean the film, a director's cut? That was released in
2003, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, and that was 15 rated then.
And so this is the thing, because at least as I remember it, because the director's cut versions were 15, but the theatrical cut, or at least we had older DVDs, still said 18 on them. So as far as my dad was concerned, at least, it was an 18. But 13 is about the age where I started getting really interested in film. So of course I wanted to go through all the classics, and I did as many classics as I could, so that there were in sort of the 15, 12 range. Because my dad said once I was 13, yeah, 15s are fine, whatever, but no 18s. But of course, being a massive sci-fi nerd and sort of starting to have a sort of burgeoning interest in horror, Alien's an essential classic to watch. I sort of grown up seeing this iconography everywhere and was desperate to see the film. But Dad's like, well, no, it's an 18. You're not allowed.
Sorry to interrupt. When did you say you saw it in 2013? You say?
No, sorry, in 2011. So when I was 13. But basically, it was from having to convince my dad for months to let me watch it. Because unfortunately, I wasn't a very rebellious child. So at no point did the thought occur to me to just simply watch it and not tell him. So I sort of fought for permission for months and ended up doing sort of research on it to work out like why is it an 18? Is there something really bad that happens in it that pushes it over? And the consensus was sort of no, not really. It's all relatively fine. And in fact,
I know it's.
It's I remember mentioning I sort of told my dad, like, look, this is what people are saying online, it's fine. And he hadn't seen Alien, so he had nothing to base this on. But because he saw that 18 certificate, he just blindly said, nope, it must be not appropriate. I'm not going to do any further research on it. I'm just going to assume. And this, I think, for me, this is what really kind of kickstarts my interest in film certification. Because well, look at the power this number has had. That regardless of what the content's actually in it, regardless of any other research someone could do, a parent will see it and go, made a decision, done, without any further thoughts. And of course, when I finally watched it, the condition was he had to watch it with me. And then he said, oh, that wasn't too bad, really. And then suddenly my mind just exploded, like, yes, of course it's not. That's what I've been telling you for months. So that sort of what kind of radicalized me in a way. And I think quite shortly after I watched Aliens, I think probably the rest of the Alien series as well, it wasn't until I was about 16 I started studying film at A-level where he finally sort of officially said, right, you can watch what you want, I don't care anymore. But there were a few others I sort of snuck in at points, maybe when I was like 14 or 15. Like I think I watched Clockwork Orange when I was 15, and I think I watched about half of Eyes Wide Shut when I was 14 because it was on TV late one night.
That's more deserving for it here.
Yeah, that was sort of starting to tick over. But yeah, it wasn't until so about 16 where I was like consistently watching 18s and sort of not worrying about rating so much anymore. But yeah, that's sort of my origin. Luckily, it sort of ties in a lot with, as I said, my current interest in the system. It kind of really put into perspective, the power of the rating and sort of what it can sort of mean for a piece of media.
I think you touched on an interesting subject there, Nick, because it's because of reasons like that I feel that a ratings board have to be a bit more careful, a bit more nuanced about how flippantly they slap a rating on that. Because, like I say, your dad just saw an 18 rating on a film and just said no, even though Alien is one of the tamest films out there. I've always said, if you were to remove a chestburster scene, it's pretty much a 12 rating.
Yeah.
I mean, the word fuck is only mentioned 4 or 5 times, depending on which version you watched. It doesn't have any nudity or sex. It doesn't really have any other gore other than the chestburster scene. So I suppose you could say tonally it's a bit strong for a 12, but I think the fact it's such a classic now has eliminated that. So the fact that it was ever rated 18 is so ridiculous. I mean, they admit that the only reason they gave it, okay, it was an X back in 1979, but the 18 now, as opposed to the AA/15 rating that the distributors were expecting back in when it was released, was because they thought the creature was too sexually perverse. Or the film gave a perverse idea of sexual reproduction. And it's just like, you fucking idiots. It's an R rating in America, an M rating in Australia. Granted, that's before they had the MA15 plus. So, I mean, that's kind of, Australia's one's a bit kind of odd because they had their equivalent of the R/15 after they had their equivalent of the PG-13/12. Fuck it, let's not get into that. And just like, I mean, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the world when we give a film like that, put a film like that in the same category as Exorcist or Clockwork Orange or Friday the 13th? I mean,
it's just the famous British prudenceness, isn't it? Oh.
Yeah, no, it's embarrassing. I mean,
yeah,
and yeah, I mean, and of course, yeah, it was like 2003. I mean, Alien has, it's been a 15 for technically 24 years. I know it's a director's cut, not the theatrical version, but 21 years, but it was an 18 for 24 years, so it hasn't quite caught up yet. Terminator, of course, has been a 15 since the year 2000, so it's actually been a 15 now longer than it's an 18, but Terminator's a bit stronger than Alien, but even that's pretty tame. I mean, I wouldn't rate that one 12A, although we might discuss this with you, Mark, but I've definitely discussed it with our friend Tom, who does his Secrets at the BBFC podcast. If you were to split the 15 rating into a 14A and a 16 ratings, two separate ones, both Alien and Terminator, and Aliens and Terminator 2 would happily fit into 14A, if you ask me.
No, they would, because they're on the milder end of the spectrum. I mean, I can even attest to some recent ones like Oppenheimer and Prometheus. Those are
and Killers of the Flower Moon.
Quite mild or sort of marginal R's or 15s as far as I'm concerned, to where most of the mainstream public can enjoy it without grimacing. It's not quite like on one side you can have something like Deathgasm or Compliance or Kick-Ass, which is certainly pushing the 15 as far as it could. I would like to interject a little further because I know you've talked about elaborately your experiences with RoboCop and the Alien and stuff. When I did see my first 18 film, this film is not yet rated, which we got off Love Film. I did have to be supervised by my father, who said during the sex scenes, don't look. And that was automatically a giveaway that, okay, I would be very happy to watch this documentary about the MPAA, as long as I didn't see all the naughty bits. And I just felt so ecstatic that happened. And unlike, let's say, like Da Vinci Code or Elf and Lady, it didn't give me trauma. And when I did see it uncut, it still didn't give me trauma because that's what I expected. But then came along Watchmen. And unlike Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, which was fun and hilarious, or Afro Samurai, which was extremely violent, but animated and not disturbing, Watchmen had the unfortunate element of being the first 18 film I got to see in cinemas. I know I committed a crime. My father said, don't look during certain scenes. But then the Saw scene with the arm in the prisons came, and then the attempted rape. And then there was some ads for road safety and safe sex that were both 12A rated, but they were still very disturbing, especially seen in a dark auditorium on 35mm print. That was pretty much a nightmarish experience altogether. And I don't really say that about a lot of 18 certificate works because 18 in of itself is self-explanatory. It's not for children. It's not for your grandparent or even your churchy mother. It's for your father or the angsty, horny teenager who wants to bash his head on stuff and watch the most nastiest shit he can find. If he wasn't doing that, he'd be looking at Best Score or Lively. So that's what I tell my experience for. I mean, you can laugh at me about the Watchmen thing if you want to.
Oh, we will.
I'd say Watchmen does earn its 18, to be fair. Like, it is, I was fine with it, but it is graphic in both violence and sexuality. So it's fair enough that it's got the 18.
Yeah.
Quite lucky.
I mean,
As a first 18 film in the cinema, Watchmen on 35mm, that's pretty cool.
Oh, it was badass. I still remember that event, seeing it 15 years ago. I wouldn't have it any other way, but yeah, I did confess to doing something that I shouldn't have done, but I did that with Wild Wild West and Spider-Man and Disturbia, and I bought Ghost in the Shell underage, so
Well,
I'm a bit of a
who hasn't done?
badass.
Well, come on, Mark. Who the fuck hasn't done that? Like I say, I mean, my first 18 I saw was 28 days later. Yeah, I thought it was okay and everything. Whether or not that deserves its 18, I don't know. I mean, maybe there was a scene where he puts his thumbs through that geyser. Well, it's kind of brief, so I mean, I don't know really. Probably, jury's out on that one. And of course, yeah, as you know, Mark, my first 15 was South Park, and that was what 15. That was a great one to see.
Well, I'm still jealous of you about that one, even though, there's an 8-year difference between us. But I will say for Nick, because he's younger than us, you would have cried and probably been caught trouble sneaking to watch South Park. Or even, replace that with Perfect Blue or Fritz the Cat. You would have had that problem growing up back in the 90s or even early 2000s, where you had all these sort of adult cartoons and anime that was coming out. And I was told you can't see them, even though they look cartoonish. Usually, animation tends to be the trigger point for me when it comes to film ratings, because, as everyone knows, what we would assume, if it's colourful and it's talking animals and stuff, therefore it must be for children.
The
I don't know.
fallacy. Thanks, Disney.
Exactly, and I'm sure you even felt that when you saw like Waltz with Bashir or Fritz the Cat or Dead Man Wonderland again.
Even though they had a 15 or 18 ratings, and therefore, clearly not for kids.
Exactly, but that didn't matter in my head. I assumed, I want to see it. I was that child, but I know it's not really talking about the 18 certificate in of itself, but I did mention Perfect Blue, and that's always a point of interest for people when I talk about animation at the 18 level. Is if you really want to see animation that's clearly not appropriate for children, watch that. Mission from the Darkness, Alien from the Darkness, Fritz the Cat, or Waltz with Bashir, which is a great film. They only got an 18 despite having graphic animated sex between humans, like penis going to a vagina. That was it. That was the last thing I told Nick before I had to leave off to go see In a Violent Nature at Finchley, The View.
Oh yeah.
Did you like A Violent Nature?
I actually didn't. I thought it was really dull. But I'm glad I got to see it just for the title. There aren't very many films that come out with the word violence in it with an 18 certificate.
It is a bit dull, I have to admit, but it is quite gruesome in some ways. I mean, it's not like it's just an 18 here. I mean, you look at you go on IMDb, check its ratings all over the place. It's got an R18 plus in Australia. Okay, got 18A in Canada, not an R, so bit disappointing there. We've got 13 plus in Quebec, 18 in Ireland and in Lithuania, Spain, Russia, and everything. USA, it says not rated. Now, it could just be they couldn't be asked to submit it for a rating, but it could also mean that because it could have got an NC-17 rating. I mean, that scene where he takes out that person practicing yoga is pretty fucking brutal. So, I mean, it wouldn't be undeserved.
But even then, for me at least, that scene, because of I view the whole film as a comedy. Whether that's how intentional that is, I'm not sure. But with the yoga scene, it's so over the top and so ridiculously, needlessly complicated as a kill. It kind of, I feel like it sort of extinguishes some of the sort of intensity of that violence by just being so silly. Because I remember I laughed my way through that, and when I saw it in the cinema, it was a sort of a secret screening, so no one there knew what the film was going to be. And it was about a 50-50 split of people sort of screaming and squirming versus laughing, and each group sort of being confused at the other's reaction.
Well, I guess some people say the satire, although very dark satire, like Funny Games, the Hanukkah movie. So I kind of get that, but I just found it to be... maybe I'm sort of lazy or I have restless leg syndrome, but I thought it was quite boring and it didn't really quite make clear there was supposed to be some sort of satirical or deconstructive take on the horror genre. I thought Funny Games was perhaps a better film that dealt with that sort of subject, and I had a better laugh at Funny Games. Have you seen the Austrian or the American versions of those films? Because trust me, there was one or two scenes in there that I was like, chortling.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
I've
not-
seen the original, not seen the American one yet, but I remember watching it back. I went to sit on Love Film back in university, one of the last ones I probably got from it before they went defunct. But yeah, no, that was you're right. That is also just, of course, in the title, but that is a comedy as well, a dark one, absolutely pitch black. But yeah, sort of deconstructing sort of these notions of sort of horror films, and also sort of calling out the audience who enjoys these kind of films, and sort of that sort of the enjoyment of violence in media and in art as entertainment.
Oh, definitely. Well, just to give it away, maybe Rob will find it either disturbing or hilarious. There's a scene
I've heard of the concept of Funny Games, but carry on.
a woman gets a shotgun and shoots one of the assailants, and then the whole scene is reversed with like rewind button, and it's like.
They literally pick up the remote in universe to do it, don't they, as sort of part of the commentary.
And on a ratings level, it's an 18, but if you took out the sadism element, it would perfectly be fine at 15, because there's almost only one graphic scene. All the scenes are shown off screen, and it result in blood detail. Although that one I'm quite conflicted on, because I would rather show Funny Games, in my opinion, than Irreversible Love, which most people just can't handle, because Love, to me, it's pornographic in the same way like 9 Songs is porn, or 50 Shades of Grey, which is softcore, but in my view, it's kind of hardcore because S&M fetishes. Oh, that's a bit brutal. I don't know. What's your take on it? Because I know between the three of us, I'm probably the bit more of the churchy one, because I don't really watch porn, unless you count Nautica's Blitz Tactics, or looking at Uma Thurman's feet from Pulp Fiction as porn.
I don't think anyone does that other than you, okay, Mark?
Look, I mean, whatever gets you off.
I mean, generally speaking, when we talk about porn, we mean the stuff you get on Pornhub or X videos or Spank Bang or any of those other freaking those sort of websites. I mean, that's just porn's just what you watch on the internet now. I mean, outside of that, I don't think anyone gives two shits.
I think porn is it's an interesting category, because it's a separate medium in and of itself, and I think what defines it is essentially its intent rather than anything else. I remember I've seen Love DVDs are being sort of grouped in the adult section of like CEX, where it's literally next to just other porn parodies. But I don't think I necessarily agree that it is porn, because I think it's, while there may be titillation involved as part of the general, plot line and sort of the thematics of it, I think it is still broadly a narrative feature in its own right. And while pornography often has a narrative, the narrative's sort of not what you're there for. It's sort of a vehicle for just giving context to various scenes, of which the point is, to be erotic, to get people off. So, while I think Love is much more, the narrative is more important than that, and eroticism is just sort of part of it rather than the other way around.
I mean,
well, I suppose it's quite an artsy, deliberate drama about a young man's relationship and being stuck as like an art film student in Paris or something. So it appeals to a certain select group. It's not just 50 minutes of watching people doing it. I mean, between Love and 9 Songs, 9 Songs is probably the most overt in its smuttiness, more so than anything. I don't know if you've seen either film, but 9 Songs is pretty much just watch people go to music shows and getting blowjobs. Like, ooh, that was quite rich. That's actually the first porno I ever saw.
Well, it's like with the French film Baise Moi.
Ben, are you calling that pornography?
Well,
To
it's
me,
got
it
like
is.
what we consider to be hardcore porn scenes in it. But the two fucking main leads were porn stars, and then they actually had sex scenes where you actually do see them getting slammed, but getting penetrated. So I mean, it kind of counts as it. I mean, I bought it on DVD back in 2011, not realizing it had actually been cut. It only got released fully uncut 2 years later. So I won't actually seeing rewatching it to see what they cut out. But even when I first saw it, it's like, oh gee, I didn't know you could show that in 18 and everything. But of course, I mean, you can you can get away with pretty much anything. We'll get onto that in a second. But of course, I just suddenly remembered, and it's something I meant to bring up earlier, is of course, Caligula has just been re-released in its Ultimate Edition, and of course that's completely uncut, and just straight through with an 18 and everything. So I mean, we've come a long way.
I actually saw the Caligula Ultimate cut at the Cinematheque in Nice, where I also saw Irreversible in Love. Maybe because of the shock value alone. As far as I can tell you, because unfortunately I've not seen the previous Caligula versions, it's a little bit more restrained in terms of the sexual content. We don't see as much full-blown shots of unsimulated penetration, that sort of thing. And it's all sort of B-roll footage that was meant to be used for the original film versions, but they put it in this version, much to the dismay of the former producer Bob Guccione, who owned Penthouse and Tinto Brass. So this was Malcolm McDowell's vision of what the film should have been, and it has more respectable reviews as a result. It's a bit complicated as far as I'm concerned, but that's as much as I can tell you.
No, that's fair. And like I said, I've never seen a Caligula. I can't find it anywhere online to actually watch the damn film if I, ever feel like.
Play at the Chapter Art Centre in Cardiff. Make sure to get a ticket, because I'm sure that will be packed.
Well, if I can be
Chapter
off the go,
Art Centre. Well, I am one for seeing the odd art film or indie film every now and again. But what I'm saying is, actually, I was going to bring up your cinema that we went to. We saw Ennis Men. Weirdly enough, they played an R18 film at that place. It was called Polisone Gapilots, or The Best Frivolous Times of My Life. I can't quite remember the title, but it was something a bit naughty, and they had to get a special license from the council of Cardiff just to get it played.
All right. Never. What's it called again?
I think it was called Polissons and Galopettes, but that maybe its French title.
How do you spell that?
Oh, sorry. Here's the English version: The Good Old Naughty Days. That's what it's called. And they played it at select cinemas across Britain. And it was with an R18 and from a respectable film distributor, the same distributor that released Irreversible and Secretary. So you already know it's a bit naughty.
Compilation of free. Oh, right. It's really it's retro old school porn stuff with 1905 to 1930. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, just thought to bring that up for anyone who's curious. They did a double bill of Inside Deep Throat and then the porno movie Deep Throat, and they released as a double bill at certain locations in the more seedier parts of London. So, if you know what I mean. Weirdly enough, Soho is my favourite area of London, in case anyone asks. Hopefully that's not held against me.
I always wonder if
anyone would be asking.
If you go see something like this in the cinema, how do you dress for that? So I went to see Thundercrack at the BFI during their Scala season earlier this year, which of course is also basically a 3-hour-long porno. But I'd heard interesting things about it. So, go on, I'll go to that. And as I was getting ready on the day, I was like, what am I doing? I'm getting a train to London to sit and watch porn with strangers for 3 hours, and then I'm going to go home again. And then I was like, what do I wear for that? Do I dress smart? Is it jeans and t-shirt? Okay, I'd never had that situation happen before.
Was it many women in there, or was it mostly just like men in overcoats?
No, it was quite balanced because, of course, Thundercrack's quite an old film. It's 70, I want to say 75. It might be slightly older than that. But so a lot of the audience, it was quite an even balance of genders, and most people there were sort of older couples who maybe even had seen it back in the old Scala days and sort of reliving that, that youthful joy. But yeah, no, it was a lot less CG than I thought it was going to be. It seemed everyone was sort of very nice and warm and just just having a fun time at the cinema. Lots of laughter throughout the screen as well.
Well, people were going to the cinema. I don't think anyone was there planning to just tug one out in the cinema. I don't think. Well, because again, at the same time, I mean, why would you? I mean, it's all online now. You just get your freaking phone out, and you could probably beat one out to God knows whatever just before you even have your morning cornflakes or whatever for breakfast. I mean, no one's going to be titillated by this really at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, someone did get arrested for watching Love Lies Bleeding in a cinema in America and was choking his chicken. And they had to escort him out. The police did. I thought,
well, how long ago was that?
For a 15 film like Love Lies Bleeding, which came out like in April or
that one.
March.
Shit. Yeah, Christ, that one. Yeah, I saw it. That's kind of weird. I mean, I can't. Okay, some people are just weird. Okay, I mean,
yeah, I think that's like an isolated one-off, but that's the weirdo.
I'll change the topic a little bit because I know we sound a bit like dirty old men here. In terms of like violence, I guess you can probably infer me what the most violent 18 film was for you fellas, because for me it probably would be like.
But dude, I mean that's like going to be, I mean. The upper end of violence at 18 is almost pretty much limitless now. I mean, the BBFC have straight up, ever since like Furman left and the BBFC started basically consulting the public. One of the first things the public said was like, no more cuts for 18. And they said, okay, if we don't legally have to, we won't cut at 18 anymore. And as such, I mean, the upper end of violence at 18 is almost was a sky's the limit. So say what's most violent 18. I can't even go there. Because I wouldn't know where to start. I wouldn't know where to begin thinking. You'd have to be some film that was given an NC-17 in America for its violent content, or a film that was so violent that not only was it rated NC-17, cutting it down to an R was almost impossible. But then again, I just don't know. I mean. To even get an 18 nowadays, I mean, you have to be pretty fucking violent.
Oh, definitely. There are some exceptions, like Barbarian and Last Night in Soho felt quite on the margins, but let's say in a violent nature, certainly pushed the envelope for me, especially that scene where they go to the sawmill room and they just chop that person's head off and his limbs. I'm like, that was so sustained and so prolonged, like, I almost felt I was watching a snuff film, and I felt that way about Haute Tension, which is Switchblade Romance. That movie almost made me nauseous. Film. And Green Inferno, which I saw in America, was R-rated, but there was, like a child in the screening. No, actually, it was uncut. The director's cut, so they say, and the cinema version are the exact same, and that scene where you see a man's eyes gouged out and dismembered and decapitated was just beyond gruesome. I thought Eli Roth probably had to wank off a few people at the MPAA just to get that R. Hardcore Henry is another one that I thought was so graphic. I thought, watching a guy's head being dismembered, half of his head with a wire or an optic nerve, like, what?
That's probably an element with Hardcore Henry where the whole thing's... That's the one where it's like in a first-person kind of perspective the whole way, like a video game, isn't it? Which probably adds the sort of the nauseousness of that violence. It's firstly the fact that sort of you feel almost more implicated in it because you're sort of sharing that viewpoint, as well as the fact the camera's probably shaking around as well.
Well, definitely. I mean, my friend was nauseous when he saw Hardcore Henry. I thought, this is a masterpiece. I actually use it as a workout routine, just like I do with Raid 1 and 2. But that scene where a man is decapitated in half, well, that still kind of gets me the wrong way. And then the scene where someone's head is blown off and there's blood everywhere, and you see his heart being ripped out. I thought, Jesus.
Oh, I remember that bit, yeah.
That was quite gruesome. I know you probably will disagree with me and think, well, it should have been a bit over 15, really, because it's R-rated in America. But they did have to, I was told, tone down one or two bits of violence and contextualize, hey, this is a sci-fi action movie, so, go easy on us.
See, that's what annoys me. Okay, if you're going to tone it down to get an R rating, then just, do that toning down just for American theatres. But, when you send it abroad, give us the whole caboodle. Because if it's going to get an 18 anyway, you may as well.
Yeah, I'm very much of the opinion that, essentially, if a filmmaker at the point that they're like making the film, actually doing the initial editing, decide actually I'm going to make this scene this way around, fine. Once they sort of created their edit master and they're sort of happy with picture lock, any cuts beyond that point, I think, just shouldn't happen. It's like you take the film as it is. If you don't want to have it, if you don't want to give it a certificate in this country, fine. Don't do, I hate the whole concept of like, oh no, let's cut this down so we can get a 15 version out of it or an R8. It's like, well, no, if that's the film, that's the film. It's like with when they show films on TV and they're like, oh, we've edited this down for the TV time slot. Well, why are you showing it then? If show the film or don't.
Yeah, well, you may as well. I know they used to show like things like RoboCop or Die Hard after the 9 p.m. watershed, but it would be edited to shit with all the good shit cut out. It's like, well, what's the fucking point? You must have show it on prime time. I mean, I understand why they do it at the contrary to what you said, Nick. I understand why they do it at the cinema. That's just business. I mean, they want to get bums on seats, and of course, if it's and let's not forget, if it's aimed at a certain audience and the rating you get stops the target audience from seeing it, you're gonna cut it down to get a lower rating. That's just how it works.
That's true, but then also I find that's on the director, because if you've got a director who's specifically aiming a film, say as a teenage audience, and then they make the content in the film, too strong for it, that's sort of on them at that point. But they've made the film, that's what they've made. It's sort of, I mean,
true, but of course you've got different. Sorry to interrupt, but you do have different in country different rating systems. I mean, say you make a film for a PG-13 rated, so the tween or audience can see it. Okay, you get that down to and let's face it, you had to cut out anything that could have got an R rating, and then so you release that to the but then it comes over here and the BBFC say as it stands as a 15 rating. It was like, well, I want a bunch of 12-year-olds to see it because that's a target audience. It was like, okay, well, you're going to cut stuff out. You just, again, it's probably a bit silly of the director, but if the director's American, he probably didn't know firsthand that the BBFC were going to be a bit more heavy-handed on the violence than the MPAA were, to say nothing of what continental European ratings might be with it, because they tend to be even harder on violence. I mean, I know it's frustrating, but it's just business at the end of the day, and as long as ratings exist, this shit's going to happen.
I think it's the annoying intersection between sort of the artistic side and the economic side of film. But it's necessary either. As long as once it's finished at cinema run, when it comes out to streaming or physical, it comes out uncut.
I mean, I think that's always been the game. That's been the game. You cut the shit out of it, get the theatrical rating that you want, just to get most bums on seats, and then when it comes out streaming and video, you release it uncut. I know some films they didn't. I mean, I remember Aquaman had to be cut to get a 12A. It wasn't so much cut as one edit. They edited out some CGI blood and everything, and they didn't reinstate that for the video. But I thought to myself, well, to be honest, those edits don't really make a huge amount of difference to the actual film. So I mean, there'll be no point in putting them back in if it's going to end up with a higher rating and you're going to get your film in the same category as Logan or anything. But
not necessarily. But then it's I don't know. For me as a principle, it feels like, because then that's almost essentially lost media. Even if it's something slight, like just a bit of blood, it's still something that at some point the director or visual effects editor or someone signed off and was like, "This is the vision," and then it's since been removed. Yeah.
Although you could blame the ratings board for it if the cuts are so minor that it makes no difference to the movie. I mean, I was saying this about Casino Royale and everything, the difference between the cut 12A version and the uncut 15 version. What they cut out is so minimal. I'm saying for all the difference that made, you may as well pass the whole thing uncut at 12A. But
Yeah.
but then again, that's a little bit off topic. So I'm going to be talking about the 18 rating.
No, but when
But I
you
mean,
get to the 18 rating, I think filmmakers alone they should just embrace it. I mean, I get into trouble with Rob on a few times on this, but I always like to celebrate the strength of the adult rating just to show how badass it can be. But often get laughed at for this because it doesn't quite meet with reality because of a lot of those types of films we talked about often being R-rated stateside or MA15 in Australia, so on and so forth. But there are some outliers. I mean, as far as on the flip end, the R rating is concerned, and we're both 18 in the UK, X and Poor Things and probably Hardcore Henry and Green Inferno show you can get away with quite a lot. They're at least boundary pushing for their R ratings. That makes me happy because I don't like how penalized NC-17 is. To where I believe it called for its abolition, but you disagree with me on that, mainly because they should use it, but the reality is they just never will. And when they did use it with Blonde, there was all a bunch of fuss about it, with this and that, or it's exploitative of Marilyn Monroe's story, it's sexist. Why did they put John F. Kennedy? That was defamation.
well, again, we keep having this conversation until we're probably going to have it until the sun burns out and everything. But I compare our ratings to America's. I think, okay, which ratings equivalent of which was like, okay, well, if the Americans think it's okay, all this is okay in that particular rating, so why the fuck aren't we thinking it's okay at our equivalent rating? As I mentioned, I don't like the idea of a film getting essentially a higher rating in this country than it does in America or Australia, because it makes us look bad. It makes us look a bunch of lily-livered, squeamish, pearl-clutching fanny features, which is not how I want my country being viewed.
Well, the reality is, I think it's probably too late. I mean, most Europeans already view British people as stuck up, stiff upper lip, prudish, nationalistic, and a bit dim. And you certainly will get that same sort of response if you go like to Spain or France on holiday. English tourists, leave. You cause trouble for us. You are uncultured. If the fact that in France you can watch films like a lot of 18 films would pass at 12 or even 16. Some of them even all ages, like Trainspotting 2, which was passed tout public avec avertissement, which is like their version of PG. I feel a bit cheated. But then again,
Yeah,
French culture is not the same as Anglo culture.
Or British culture, I know, but again, it does make you question. If they're okay with this, why aren't we? I mean, I think that's how societies always work. The two cultures will look at each other and they may see better elements of each other's culture, and I just say, well, hang on, if they do it that way, why don't we? I think that way's better than the way we do it. And we could be here all day, but I mean, when a country permits something that your country doesn't, you do get the impression. You do sort of get the impression that you're getting cheated. It's like, well, hang on, they're allowed to do it. Well, why aren't we? I mean, you're just being a dick. I mean, I know I've said this all the times, but yeah, I'm just saying that if a film is to be rated 18, I just want it to warrant it and everything. It's why when I see a film being downgraded from 18 to 15, I say, well, that 18 it never deserved that 18 anyway. It should never have had it. I mean, that 18 was a lie. It was a 15 in disguise. So, I mean,
Maybe not necessarily a lie, but a sign of the times moving on, and people coming. I think as in general, as the decades march on and boundaries get pushed, and generations change, things that were sort of more controversial 40 years ago just sort of stop being as potent. So I think it's natural. I mean, almost everything that's currently rated, whatever rating today, probably in about 40 years' time, will have dropped another level each, just from the general sort of, movement of what's acceptable.
or at the lower rating, they might even get bumped up. I mean, how many U's get bumped up to PGs and PGs up to 12As. And to be honest, I'm not entirely surprised they do. I mean, we've spoken ad infinitum about Watership Down and how that shouldn't have been U-rated, and I don't even think it even should be containable at PG. I mean, it's pretty much 12A if you ask me. But I mean, if that ever had a U rating was mind-boggling, and because a lot of U's are getting to PGs, as I've said. Jaws and Jurassic Park are now 12As, as is Fellowship of the Ring, which, let's face it, in case of Fellowship of the Ring, I'm not surprised. And yeah, kind of not surprised with Jurassic Park either. Obviously, I'm glad it was a PG at the time, because that was back when 12 was restricted and I was only 8. I'd been fucking pissed off if I couldn't see Jurassic Park. But obviously nowadays, it's like, yeah, okay, 12 isn't restricted anymore. You can you don't have to like contain that PG. And of course, yeah, Jurassic Park is a very strong film. It's maybe an intense film, to say nothing of films like Arachnophobia, The Mask, and Mission Impossible, which again is not really related to the subject at hand, but said what I said.
Yeah.
Well, I will interject your point there, because even though I always like to complain about 15 films being too violent and graphic these days, I don't always have that same sort of judgment with the PG films from my childhood. I always look with rosy tinted glasses at, Men in Black was PG, Small Soldiers was PG, and just seeing them bumped up to 12A, artificially or through DVD releases and stuff, kind of upsets me and messes with my nostalgia a little bit. Makes it seem like you go out on a whim. I mean, some titles deserve it. I mean, Hunchback of Notre Dame is a U certificate that probably should not be U. And in the case of Jaws and Princess Mononoke, those are films I've actually said to people, well, you should bump it up to 15, because they're very violent and bloody. Airplane should be a 15. Oh, wait, it already is. If you just look at the DVD, that is.
Well, yeah. Well, Small Soldiers isn't a 12 yet. It's still a PG. Men in Black is 12, yeah, but remember it was cut for a PG. But to be honest, I mean, what you've just said, I mean, that was kind of going against what we're saying. Yeah, I mean, standards change, and of course, most of those PGs that have been bumped up to 12s were PG-13 in America. So really, what it means, they would have been 12A anyway if 12A existed. It's just that because 12 was just 12 back then, they couldn't afford to, and they just contained it at PG.
And once again, we've got the economic and the marketing factors, because what I've read a lot recently is the U rating has sort of become almost tainted as being like for babies, which of course is not what it means. But where basically anyone can now go and watch a 12 as long as they've got parents, supposedly, but that's not restricted. PG sort of become the new U, and everything sort of shifted one. And now, that's why everyone, it's sort of sense like, we can't re-release this film as PG because everyone will think it's for young kids, so we must re-rate it as a 12 somehow, because then it will sort of chime with the same audience who are watching the Marvel films, for example, who are used to seeing 12s as their sort of standard sort of cinematic input. So that's the other thing, it's this weird thing where they're sort of wanting to make things almost more explicit, or to make it more appealing for that target demographic.
Well, it's like I was saying, I mean, the U has been like practically sidelined as babies. Well, again, it has almost gone the way of America's G rating, and of course America's PG rating is just pretty much like kids stuff now, and so which of course so's our PG. I mean, like I say, they've gone from the likes of Beetlejuice to Frozen. We've gone from the likes of Jurassic Park to Frozen. I mean, it's very, times do change. I mean, I can only imagine like in 20 years time, 30 years time, what would make an 18 there. Obviously, I'm not expecting something like fucking Human Centipede 2 to be rated 15. I wouldn't ever expect that. I mean, obviously, I just look at certain films, I think to myself, did that have to be an 18? I mean, I really thought Exorcist would get dropped to a 15 now, but that's been re-released recently. It still retained its 18 rating, and the first Blade, which I thought was due for a downgrade, or I got re-rated as 18 just recently, a few years back as well. So I'm a little bit surprised. I'm a little bit miffed, but I suppose maybe a bit longer they will be downgraded. Again, I keep comparing our rating system to America's, and of course, I know I look at our 18 as like, people think that the 18 is our equivalent of our R rating, and it's not. The 15 is. I mean, 18 is the equivalent of the NC-17, and you can tell that because they're both practically rated X. It's just kind of hard to match because their NC-17 is void like the plague.
Hmm.
But of course, again, I don't want things to have higher ratings than in America or Australia. So it's like, if it's only R rating, I kind of want it to only be rated 15, just like if it's only PG-13 rated. I only want it to be rated 12A. Obviously, then sometimes we give lower ratings, but then just makes me think, well, you didn't make it a proper PG-13 or R rating, so you're a dick.
Well, I
yeah, I'm
sometimes take
rambling a
the
bit there.
contrarian route because I often would like to support the more UK case for things than sometimes the US case. This has got me a little bit of dirty looks in the past because, like Disturbia, for instance, that was probably more appropriate at 15 than it was at 12 just because of the threat and more disturbing bits of violence alone.
Yeah, but wasn't that R
Um,
originally? But then only rated
Yep,
PG-13 on appeal.
that is correct there.
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider that a true PG-13. I'd say no, that's an R in disguise.
Hmm.
And then there are instances where I don't agree with either entity. Casino Royale, Da Vinci Code, and Kite Runner are, if at best, the trinity of very graphic, very strong 12s. That probably would be best at 15. I know Kite Runner, that I actually had one scene particularly that I thought would be under the Obscene Publications Act violation, Child Protection Act, but nope, they kept it in. I was like, what? I know it's kind of getting off bounds. Actually, there's an 18 film that has similar elements to Kite Run. It was called Happiness. It's going to get a re-release this in the next few months, but I thought they would never release a film like that. I thought it was going to be under violation of Obscene Publications Act because Happiness is a dark comedy about paedophilia. I thought you can't make that. And then we last week talked about a film called Savage Grace. That was about incest. And there was another film that was about incest that had similarly graphic material called Ma Mère. It's about Oupette. That was 18 and NC-17. Savage Grace was 15. I can't quite put the two together. And there was another movie about bestiality. It was called Zoo. That was 18, but it was not rated in the US. I'm just like left a little confused in my head a bit.
Well, to be fair, I've not seen any of these films. I mean, yeah, because Happiness, like you said, was NC-17, and so that does. Because when I hear a film's NC-17, I think, oh, I've got a freaking, I gotta look at that. That's why I was so That's why I was so interested in seeing Blonde, even though the film was kind of crap and dragged on too long. But I mean, it just seems to take a lot to get the NC-17, so it's always worth watching. Of course, you do see films like, all the Lars von Trier films. He pretty much makes some fucked up shit that goes on screen, and of course, yeah, they run afoul of the MPAA. Well, I say run afoul. Basically, they get the NC-17, and to get released in America, they have to either go unrated or shred it down to a freaking R rating. But of course, over here, completely uncut 18, and I'm just like, that's so based.
Well, let me interject because Antichrist and Nymphomania were never censored for the US market. They just went it unrated and let the hounds who would complain follow. I actually got Nymphomaniac on DVD, but it's the UK Region 2 cut. What I can tell you is this. Like Irreversible, don't show it to anyone. Don't show it to anyone.
Anyone at all? You have it vitrified in glass.
Well, I mean, it's not something I probably watched in front of my parents and everything. Obviously, just knowing that the film is quite controversial is enough to make me want to watch it. I mean, I remember basically around the turn of the millennium and everything. Especially, I noticed it when I was starting to started uni, but of course it had started having a bit earlier. Where was, of course, due to Furman having left and the BBFC chillaxing a lot, was just the sudden releasing of all those former video nasties that were coming out. And of course, yeah, they were coming out with 18 ratings. Turns out not all of them were uncut, but some were and everything. And of course, that's like, I mean, your mind just goes, oh, I have to see. Oh, I'm interesting. Oh, well, to be fair, I don't know if I ever watched any. Did watch them at the time, but I remember I once bought myself Zombie Flesh Eaters on DVD. But of course, you just knowing that it was like this film was once banned, and of course, naturally because it was once banned, it had an 8. It's released with an 18 rating. Just makes you think this is so awesome. There's a great sense of liberation, everything. But of course, then a lot of films that were also, but also when a film gets downgraded from a 18 to a 15, that gives me a sense of liberation as well. And it's a good sign that we're progressing forward. We're liberalizing as a society. We're not this stuck up, prudish, prickish country that we were in the past. So, it's always a good sign. Hell, what was it? Slumber Party Massacre 2 was just recently released after being banned for God's years because it was banned in the 80s, and of course they didn't release it. Just re-released now, and it's been passed on cover 15. I mean, I couldn't tell you how happy I was to hear that.
When I saw that bit on the blurb, I thought that's almost unprecedented. That's like 2 jump points back. Last time I saw stuff like that was with Puni Puni Poeme, which they banned in New Zealand, but they downgraded to R16 or even R18, which you should wonder a little bit. But I guess, so I've seen the carnage count kills. I don't know why they put these carnage count videos on YouTube. I think it's sick. Like violence porn. But anyways, nevertheless,
it's
the comedy
film,
tone,
dude.
It's the comedy tone that probably helped it get the 15.
Well, very likely, as the first Slumber Party Massacre has retained its 18, which I was shocked to hear, and I was a little disheartened, thinking, "Come on, you got to be a bit cooler than that." Although they did recently downgrade Nightmare on Elm Street to a 15, and I think it might have been a fully uncut version as well, like including all the material that was removed to get an R rating stateside. So if that's the case, I am very happy.
Yeah, no, I've heard similar because I think that's the 4K release we're getting this year is like the first time it's been released uncut, which seems crazy because I mean, be fair, the version I probably saw was the cut version then, in which case it's like, yeah, this is fine. Why is this 18? This is really, again, that's all I get. I put Nightmare on Elm Street 1 in the same category as Terminator and Alien as being basically pretty tame for the most part. Like, yeah, there's lots of blood, but it's just, there's not huge amounts of injury to go with it, so just the fountain of it coming up from the bed for the most part. I mean, the rest is basically fine. At least that's my recollection.
Well, I know Nightmare on Elm Street was always a bit more on the safer end for horror films than I saw in Hostel, which you don't want to show to normal people, so you probably vomit.
As of course, we're getting away from the regular sort of traditional slasher horror into more like the torture porn genre, which is like specialized in having the sort of what's the most ridiculous injuries we can possibly inflict on a person, the franchise.
Well, yeah, I mean, those were another good example of just how much more we're getting through. Because I would not have wanted Furman to see any of the Saw or Hostel films because he would have had a shit fit. He would have. It's kind of funny because, like, obviously those uncut versions of things like Saw and Hostel, they do get like NC-17s, and then they cut them down to get an R rating. But you watch that and just thinking, it's still fucking stupidly violent, and yeah, unsurprisingly, it gets an 18 rating. I could not imagine how you'd have to just butcher and mutilate those films to get them down to a 15 rating here. But when you turn around and think, well, hang on, in Australia, they're getting ME 15 plus as well. How is this fucking ridiculous? I mean, they are like absolute violent, far more violent than any sort of 80s slasher film, which, with a few examples, or just most slasher films, because you'd be surprised how much they leave to imagination. In fact, 2 films have shown me that how much regular slasher films leave to imagination. The New York Ripper and Terrifier 2.
Well, Terrifier 2 caused walkouts and people vomiting, which I thought was hilarious. Unfortunately, they didn't do like a cinema release for it in the UK, sadly enough, but I would have loved to have seen the reactions on it, because it is certainly one of the most violent films I've ever seen. But it's so kind of silly and it's almost laughable. I didn't know how to react to it. I can't take a guy in clown makeup killing people and gouging their eyes out very seriously.
Well, it is kind of silly. I think it's just basically how little it leaves to the imagination, which is fair enough. Because again, usually most slashers they'll just show you the blade. They might show you the blade cutting into the skin, might show it coming out the end, but they won't. But they'll cut away usually after it, and that's nowadays. I mean, Christ, back in the 70s and 80s, you would just basically see the blade get a clip of your hand with a blade. You'd hear like a bump sound, and then you just see the victim just keeling over, clutching their stomach with some very fake-looking blood around it. I mean, everything else would just be left completely to your imagination.
No, but I
Yeah.
noticed that in a lot of films from that era, or the MPAA would usually, to avoid an X rating, would cut out 5 pints of blood compared to 2 pints of blood, so they'd be happy. But then again, there was inconsistency because they went really hard on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but they didn't go in as hard on Hellraiser, which I thought Hellraiser was more disturbing because it had that scene with a man being hooked, pins everywhere, and his face stretched out. He's like, "Rah! Rah!" Jesus wept.
I thought I know Hellraiser 2 was quite heavily cut down for an R rating. I can't remember the first Hellraiser. I was watching it on that GNC Cutting Edge YouTube series. By the way, have you watched that, Nick?
No, I don't think I have actually.
Okay, it's called GNC Films or Cutting Edge. Basically, it just shows you how films have run afoul of ratings board or censors, mostly the BBFC, but also it does to a rather common extent the MPAA in America, and to a much lesser extent, or much less examples being provided, Australia's ACB. The two examples for them being Predator 2 and Wolf Creek 2. It's hosted by a guy named Gavin Selkeld, and God, he knows a lot about this stuff, and it is it is very insightful. I would highly recommend you watch it if you're really into this. If you're really into this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I actually interviewed him on a podcast one time. Rob wasn't there for it, but it's very entertaining and engaging. We were talking nostalgically about Men in Black and how it got a PG, despite having quite a bit of swearing and sci-fi. That's another story there. Actually, I'm curious, between you fellas, what is your favourite 18 film? I know probably it's RoboCop or something, but you're more than welcome to state.
I think probably Trainspotting, which is, I mean, one of my top 3 favourite films of all time, probably. It's another one that sort of, to me at least, if I was rating it, I'd probably put it at 15. I'm aware that might not be everyone's view, but
the problem is, though, is sorry to interrupt. I think that's more just do with a drug thing. You know what I like about drugs, but sorry. Carry on.
Well, but on the drug, because that's the thing, because it's not massively violent. Like, there's sex in it, but like not. We've had worse at 15, and it probably is just down to the drugs. But then the thing is, I think there's a perception with Trainspotting that it glorifies drugs, which I think is the very sort of I've watched the first 20 minutes kind of viewpoint. If you watch the whole thing, it's like, it's maybe not as, I don't know, explicit with its anti-drugness as, say, saying Requiem for a Dream, which I kind of think of as like a sister film to it. But it absolutely is anti-drug. It's just sort of it's sort of wrapped up in the whole everything else that's going on in terms of sort of that maturing and sort of the transition to adulthood, which is sort of used to glue that sort of the anti-drug message together. But no, that's Trainspotting is probably one of the best British films certainly of all time. One of my favourites.
I like the sequel more than the first film, but I thought they were masterful works mainly because I liked the soundtrack. I was obsessed with the soundtrack as a child, even though I legally couldn't watch the film. But for anyone who is curious, my favourite 18 film still remains the first one I really got to see was This Film Is Not Yet Rated. Obviously, because we're obsessed with film censorship and ratings, which kind of gets you weird looks from people because not as many people heard about, unless you're people like us who know about censorship. So by that assessment, I usually will just mention Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, which on the surface doesn't seem like it warrants its 18 that much. Mainly you got it because of criminal behaviour in the context of some violence, which isn't even bloody. There's 2 uses of the C word. and some pot smoking.
There's also talking about the criminal behaviour things. I know, and this is more of a Hays Code thing. I'm not sure how much this is still a problem nowadays, but the idea of like criminal behaviour be going punished or unpunished. Like in Lockstock, I'm pretty sure it's that everyone kind of gets their comeuppance in some way. So it's interesting that that is contributing to the 18, because like, yeah, I get it, people are breaking laws, but also they're also fucking themselves over throughout the whole thing.
No, it is.
Well,
I mean, screwball.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of criminal behaviour, that tends to be more problematic issue than that 12A. While they say while the first Fast and the Furious has been downgraded to a 12A after they realizing that like a 15 isn't going to stop a bunch of potential drag racers from seeing a film. The Nicolas Cage Gone in 60 Seconds is still rated 15. Again, it's because it seems to glamorize stealing cars, but it's like, well, if you're going to steal cars, a 15 isn't going to stop you from seeing it. So, no.
I think what 12-year-olds are stealing cars?
I know exactly. I mean, as if like say it's glamorous. If you're going to a person that's going to steal a car, you're not going to just a film isn't going to change your mind on that. And it's just
No, not at all. I mean, if anything, I'd be more worried about the 15, 16-year-old because they're at that age of their lives where almost becoming adults, cheeky little fuckers and terrors. As we were all teens, we got into some bad habits.
Not stealing cars.
Well, not that, but you probably smoke a doobie or probably skip school so you could shag your bird or something. But that's beside the point. Actually, wait enough, you said criminal behaviour. Skywalkers. It's a documentary that just came out that got an 18 for the weirdest thing. People walking on high velocity buildings without legal permits. Unsafe, unregulated. That's the only reason I got an 18. That's ridiculous.
Right, yeah. Imitable behaviour, isn't it? That is insane.
So fucking stupid. I mean, fuck me.
Bad enough films get 18s for wrist cutting or people sniffing glue, but that is the strangest issue I've ever heard for a film to get as an adult rating for that.
Yeah, that is a sign. They need to really chillax on that.
There must be an example. I can't think how many. What's the film with an 18 certificate that's like the least deserving of it in terms of like the mildest 18? Because that's probably a front runner for it.
It'd be Garage. It's an Irish film that I really love. I've talked to Rob. I've got the DVD in case I go to Cardiff. I'll bring it at his place. It's a little Irish film about a lonely man, and the only reason I got an 18 because it showed a VHS cover that had a hardcore porn on it. It's brief. If you miss it, you miss it.
How's that not 15 at most? That's insane.
And they mentioned this on the DVD commentary of it, like, they only got it because of that one clip that they showed, like an R18 VHS cover. You don't actually see, unless you pause it, the birds and the bees is all I'll say. It's so brief, you'll miss it. Waltz of Bashir's another one. I think that one had a little bit more going on with the war context, and also because it's a film about Israel-Palestine issues. That could be a little too confrontational nowadays, but that's beside the point. So it would be Garage would be the mildest. For you, Rob, I don't know. You could probably add your 2 cents on this.
Well, I don't know. I was also going to wonder if anyone wanted to know my favourite 18-rated films, as I never got around to mention.
Go right ahead.
Having said that, I have no idea. I mean, in terms of guilty pleasures, I've got too many to mention. Probably my 2 most known ones would either be Freddy vs. Jason or Commando. In terms of actual decent films, could be considered my favourite, that I've got 18 rating. Well, basically, a lot of the ones that I really like, of course, been downgraded. So, of course, like Die Hard and Aliens and Terminator and stuff like that. Or hell, even the uncut version of Terminator 2, which would have been an 18 back in the day. But, of course, most of these have been downgraded, and rightfully so. So, yeah, it probably would just be well, to say nothing about all these slasher films and the horror films and everything, have all been rated 18 plus. But I'm guessing my favorite 8. Yeah, you probably predicted right, Mark. I'm probably just gonna say RoboCop because I mean I'm just trying to think of all the other countless other films. Well, maybe would I like Lock, Stock? I do like Lock, Stock quite a bit actually. It's quite a fun, quite a good film. But I'll just for now, I will say RoboCop is my favorite 18 rated film, especially the director's cut, which has got all the proper versions in it, stuff in it. But for mildest 18 rated film, I could just say all the ones that have been downgraded to like 15s at times because like they were only rated 18 in some stupid zealotry of back then. I mean, have you seen One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yeah, that's not one. I can't believe it's still 18.
That's been downgraded, hasn't it?
Or is it? Has that been downgraded?
Yep, to 15.
I'm pretty certain. One Who, yeah, I know.
They probably thought the mental illness issue was probably a little too complex for 70s era audiences. That's why the X or the 18 still remained for as long as it did. But I don't know.
I think it's more the my brother reckoned it was the electroshock, the electroshock scene.
But there's also another scene where Jack Nicholson calls Nurse Ratchet a C word, so...
Oh god, that would get an 18 back then. Fuck me.
Well, that was a factor. I mean, some of the scenes in it, I thought it was a dark comedy. I thought it was hilarious at first, but there's that scene with the...
actually, no. Sorry,
self-harming and suicide. Go on.
I was about to say Gone Girl because of the use of the word cunt, but again, there was a bit where she, spoiler alert, kills Neil Patrick Harris's character, which is a bit. Maybe you're right about that. Maybe right about that. I'm just trying to think of films that. I suppose any film that's been rated 18 just for language is probably the mildest one. Bear in mind, if you took any film that was cut for to get a 15 and just cut mildly, you could say the uncut version of that is probably the mildest 18 you've seen, like Bridget Jones's Diary, which had to have the phrase "hand-fisted cunt" changed to "hand-fisted cow" just to get a 15 rating. It's like that is the stupidest fucking reason to ever give something.
And like we were saying earlier, that's such a slight change in terms of like the meaning of the sentence or the scene. It's like, what are we really missing here? Like, come on, just let it through.
Well, I'm a little more flexible on that one because it's a film that's aimed at a female audience. That word is quite misogynistic in its original meaning, but because in Britain it's not gender specific as much as it is like in US and Canada, it doesn't have that much venom. Like if I called you a cunt in your face, you'd probably be like, right on, man. But if I called your girlfriend that, she would be very right to smack me in the face and kick me in the balls.
I do just want to say one example of probably a very mild 18 would probably be Ken Loach's The Angel's Share.
Oh, defo.
Because it's only an 18 because the word cunt is mentioned 20 times, which they cut down to like 6 or 8 to get a 15. It's like, for fuck's sake, mate, you really shouldn't rate something 18 for language alone. It's just prudish. But
also, an at 6 cunts is fine, but he goes to 30, and there's some change that happens in just incrementing the number that radically changes the level of maturity an audience needs to handle it. It's insane. Anything language-based, just I find insane with ratings.
Well, yeah, I mean, one might say language shouldn't really factor into rating anyway. I mean, okay, maybe that might be a bit overkill, but I think all language should be containable within 15. I'm sorry, violence and sex should push it to 18 only. Well, and maybe some other things, but certainly not language. But on the subject, back on the subject you were talking about, Mark, if you want to get back to it.
Well, I'll make a counter argument on terms of language. There are some films that are really aggressive, like Rise of the Foot Soldier and Nil by Mouth, which has like 50 plus uses of cunt, and it's often accompanied by racism and violence, and also sexual behavior, rape and stuff like that. And I thought, whoa, very very rough. As far as I'm concerned. On the flip end, I know with mild 18s versus hardcore ones, there were films that for a long time I refused to see, mainly because I feared prosecution. As far as the those very adult films are concerned, the ones that are like banned or you should never watch, are there films that you would dare not watch for fear of prosecution, or you just feel like that's a step too far? Because I know film
Well,
from Eastern
as
Europe always gets talked about.
well, yeah, Mark, as I was saying, I mean, I wouldn't do it out of fear of prosecution because that's just fucking dumb. I mean, but I mean, I have no intention to watch a Serbian film, even if it's cut, even if it's censored 18 rated version. I mean, most torture porn films, I'm saying that I would not recommend people watch. I mean, okay, if you watch, but don't show them to anyone. I mean, later Saw films get a bit ridiculous and everything, so they not quite as lose their impact a bit. But fucking hell, something like watching a Human Centipede 2, and I just found it absolutely fucking grim. And that was a cut version I saw as well. I wouldn't want to see the uncut version. Obviously, if someone wants to watch it, I won't try to legally stop them again because free speech and all that. But I mean, I do question your sanity or psyche or just what kind of person you are if you feel the need to, if you want to watch something like that. To say nothing if you would enjoy it.
Or what if I told you I saw Human Centipede 2 full sequence in its UK cut form? You'd think I was crazy, right? But I actually have twice at university.
I have seen the UK cut version only.
A dark comedy, like extremely pitch black humor in like a funny games type of way. You probably would be like, "That's it. I'm not being friends with Mark. He can go fuck off before I can keep his Da Vinci Code obsessed ass to himself." Am I wrong to think Human Centipede 2 is a really dark comedy, fellas? Jury's out.
I've not seen it myself, but I wouldn't judge anyone for enjoying any film broadly. I think if we get into films that sort of not, cause sort of the red lines I can make, things of like if you're familiar with the guinea pig films or like Slaughtered Vomit Dolls or things like that, where we're getting to the real depths of like someone is having some kind of psychotic break on film. To the point where it's like there's barely plot, it's just gore, it's all like torture porn plus. Like that's what we're getting to the category of like, I don't know, I have no idea if any of those films have any kind of legal release over here, nor whether maybe they should. That's sort of the next frontier beyond it.
Well, some of them are snuff movies, and I don't think you can legally show people being murdered unless there's some sort of documentary context. But even there's some pseudo-documentary films that have faced censorship issues because it lingered a little too much on all the gory carnage, like terrorists, killers, and other Middle Eastern wackos. It was like a video compilation from the people who'd done bum fights. Don't ask why I know this, but it was banned by BBFC because it was too sensationalist, and it had racial overtones as well. So, I mean, if you thought Jackass was bad, wait till you see terrorists, killers, and other Middle Eastern wackos.
What a title.
Exactly. The kind of people who would go to Southport, right, to say, "See, this is what's happening. Let's watch this and sort of jerk off to it because it feeds into our ego." Or like those football hooligan videos that used to be a thing where you just watch people beating each other up. And it was played as cool and had the thumping music. A lot of that was banned or censored in the 2000s because of ASBO. ASBO. How millennial of us to know about that?
That was a real blast from the past.
And Chad.
Well, what was I going to say? Well, Nick isn't a millennial, he's Gen Z.
Yeah, just about, yeah. But I definitely remember the ASBO stuff growing up.
1998 or 99?
98.
Oh yeah, still you would have been a bit on the younger end. So you would have been still upset like me. You couldn't see Team America World Police.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that age probably didn't quite know about it anyway. I remember I was annoyed that I couldn't see Gone Girl because I was 16 and I was I'd started studying film properly and all my lecturers were talking about it amongst themselves, and then my entire class was like, well, we're not allowed to see it.
I kind of get that. What about Ted or Watchmen?
I remember Ted. I was never interested in sort of Seth MacFarlane's humour, so I was sort of not fussed about not seeing Ted, but I remember a lot of my sort of peers were sort of interested in that. I was slightly not quite there, but my sister, who's 3 years older, was in the middle of the whole when the In-Betweeners movie came out. and there's a big push for it to be 15, even though obviously the series was 18, and the film was originally going to be 18, I think, before someone pointed out the entire target audience was sub 18.
Well, it is true. I mean, I was watching Inbetweeners certainly before I turned 18. That is the first TV show I ever saw that had that certificate alongside Requiem from the Darkness, which is an anime, an Afro Samurai. So I have quite fond memories of Inbetweeners. It's what separates 90s-born millennials from 80s-born millennials like yourself, who probably grew up on Grange Hill. And some of you lot may be fans of Skins.
I've
watched the first couple of episodes of Skins. I haven't. I sort of just stopped watching it because, couldn't be asked to watch it.
I think Skins was, I think, very slightly before my time. I tried watching the first season in uni, but I think I'd either grown past it or it just wasn't for me. But I didn't continue with it.
Well, yeah, it's an acquired taste. I mean, I prefer Inbetweeners over Skins as far as like youth shows are concerned, or like that and American Pie. Inbetweeners will have the upper hand on there, but it did catch me by surprise with the 18 certificate, even in the uncut versions of the films in question, because there was that joke about a man who sucks his own cock off. Sorry, my French. Mainly it's because, you know, if it's a film that's aimed at teenagers or young or children, you have to be a bit careful with the rating and stuff. And that's why animation and superheroes often intrigues me as to why, this has a higher rating. What's going on here? And it sort of goes back to, you know, RoboCop and Watchmen. They're not superhero works with 18s, but I'm sure many people who are as young as 11 or 10 was like, Mommy, can I see Watchmen? And be bored out of their own skull when they go on a diatribe about Richard Nixon and the role of vigilantism in that layer with Ozymandias. I know I'm going a bit off on a tangent, but I'm having sort of weird nostalgic memories of a film I shouldn't have been watching, but I got to go in and see because I was tall and I had a bit of a mustache. So, hallelujah! And then with animation, you know, that's already an open mind for. I'm not going to go into detail about why I couldn't watch or get the DVD or VHS of Southport that was called, like, Pip. One of the characters was Pip or something. It was like on the VHS cover.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I know. Anyways, I'm sort of yarning on.
I remember actually, I think actually the TV series, well, X-Files and the TV series Angel, which is a spin-off from Buffy, for those who don't know, even though they're generally 15-rated stuff, there's like one episode in like each of the series that got away with that had to be rated 18, and I've watched both those episodes, like, the fuck? What the fuck is this? I mean, so yeah, that could be modest 18s. It's just weird how like some little finger just pushed them over the edge, and now it has to be in the same category as like, I don't know, Zombie Chainsaw Death Massacre or some shit like that. Well, actually, zombie films can get away with 15s and everything, so that's pretty based on the BBFC.
Or a film with a title like Bang a Whore and Cum Shot Volume 6. Cut version, of course, for the 18s, to the R18 market.
Well, it's a classic.
Or just some like those new French extremity films like Hortension or Baisemois or what's there? Is it Martyrs? Is one, I think?
Yeah, Martyrs.
Martyrs.
Actually, have I seen that one? I'm just trying to think of which ones I've seen. What's the one that involves those neo-Nazis and everything? That probably doesn't narrow it down very much. Frontiers, that's it, yeah. I've got that film on DVD. Well, I had it on DVD briefly. So I watched. It's just weird that, like, some film that just uses the word cunt too many times, or might just have a bit too much sexual content here, just suddenly gets put in the same category as that. It's like, BBFC, sort yourself out. I mean, you're just making Britain look bad.
Speaking of anything, we might need to split the 18 rating.
Sorry, what'd you say, Nick?
So if anything, it's almost like we need to split the 18 rating to like sort of sober 18s versus like extreme shit.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Well, that's why when me We've spoken about splitting the 15 to 14 and 16. That way the weakest of the 18 ratings can go into the 16.
Yeah.
And the 18s can be for proper 18 rated stuff. Because I don't think the latest two fucking Scream films should have been rated 18. If Scream 4 can be a 15, so can fucking those two. Just two.
Well, I can't speak for the Scream movies in question, but I would suppose, most 15 films, they've seen crazy stuff. They watch Live Leak and Best Score go on Pornhub. They shouldn't be, but
well, they're going to
policing
do it anyway,
as a parent is hard. I don't know. I'm just yarning on there. I would say if we were parents, which we're not, I would be a lot more concerned for children these days than back when we were children, because we didn't have as much technology at our disposal. Everything was so instant and on demand. You had to go through certain channels just to find FHM Music TV before there was the parental block. We'll have to go on the top shelf.
Well, this thing, there's such hysteria, or at least in my house, there's hysteria about film ratings and making sure I didn't see any 18s, and yet I had an iPod Touch from the age of 12. Was using the internet pretty much unsupervised from 10, and I was watching loads of, especially like anime and sort of animated shows I could just find sort of streaming online places that were probably 18, and the YouTube videos as well, and there's no policing for my parents on that end to sort of expose the hypocrisy. And of course now I've got kids even younger having iPads and age free, stumbling across all this like Elsagate kind of content farms on YouTube, which to me is a much bigger moral issue than what films do, because where films are, there's much more hoops after you jump through. There's a lot more regulation of it anyway. Well, the internet's the real kind of a source of just anyone can upload anything and anyone can access it, and not much can be done to stop them.
No, but it's true.
That is true. I mean, I've always mentioned it because, we normalize the fact in our minds that films have age ratings, and now so do video games. But they're the only two forms of media that do. Stage plays,
absolutely.
concerts, books, magazines, newspapers, music. They don't. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Bottom Live on video had an 18 rating. Of course, you didn't have to be 18 to actually go see the sodding thing.
No,
how does that work?
That's one of the things I've always found fascinating about the whole concept anyway, is that, you can say paint anything and there's no age restrictions on the National Portrait Gallery as far as I'm aware. But that's all right. It's something about somehow film was just the tipping point where no, we have to have a very structured system to all of this. And it seems so inconsistent.
To be honest, Nick, I mean, do you know why the BBFC even exist?
I imagine I was told at some point.
Fire regulations.
Fire regulations.
Yeah, the Cinematograph Act 1909 was basically legislation requiring cinemas to get licenses from their local councils for fire regulations for health and safety reasons, which is an agreeable thing to do. I totally understand. And nitrate in the film throws the fire risk. Of course, they didn't stipulate that licenses could only be revoked for violating fire regulations. And when one council revoked a license to a cinema for opening on a Sunday, which they said, well, the license didn't allow you to do that, they took them to court saying that condition wasn't related to fire regulations. They shouldn't be allowed to do that because, of course, the court sided with a council, and now basically councils started realizing they could put whatever conditions they wanted on these licenses, and most of them were regarding to what films they couldn't show. And of course, they're saying you're not showing that film, or at least you're going to cut out any objectionable content. And so councils all around the country started just demanding films be censored. And so they just said, fuck it, we'll just create our own censorship board so just we can get it through just to make it more consistent. And that's over 100 years ago. And it's just been ever since. And it's just thanks to this stupidly worded piece of legislation, we've now completely internalized this and just been brainwashed into accepting this regulation system, which no other form of media has.
Absolutely.
Sorry, a bit of a rant there, but
my argument on that is with film and obviously with video games, it appeals to sort of because Britain is very classist. Working class, maybe even middle class types, if they were upper class sort of treats and fare like the theatre, oh, they wouldn't be as harsh on that as much, so they could exercise their muscles on things that would appeal to the common man. Well, that was their logic there, and you can sometimes decipher from some of their arguments that they made in the past, and probably still do, about certain films. Like if it was a sort of art house film, they wouldn't go as hard on it, and censorship-wise, as like a film that's aimed at, going to be released in about 600 cinemas nationwide. That's how films like Man Bites Dog, which is from Belgium, got past uncut, while, let's say, Fight Club was 18 with a cut. Now maybe 15 again. And the way they were talking about, we don't want this construction worker or factory worker being manipulated by Texas Chainsaw Massacre because the pornography of terror. And then, we don't want all these nudist films because if they show them in areas where there's full of all these ethnic minority groups, it might make them excited by the leisurely lust of the white woman. I have a book about this, Behind the Scenes of the BBFC, by Edward Lamberti. He edited a lot of the pieces in it. And it does highlight some of these complaints and concerns at the time. In all fairness, theatre, it's expensive, and it's only in certain areas. Cinemas, DVD and video stores, you can find them anywhere. You can even find them where I am, and it's not a very large town. What do you think is more going to appeal to working, even middle-class people? The theatre? No. Cinema, movies,
Well, the
and even
theatre was
books
around for a
are
lot.
feels too highbrow.
Yeah, but then again, the theatre was around for much longer. Okay, we could probably have one theatre in a place where we may have several cinemas. Well, you may not in the olden days. And let's face it, I don't think back then the cinema was any more expensive, any cheaper than the theatre. I don't really think what you said really contradicts what I've just said. It's all due under some stupid regulation stupid legislation regarding fire regulations. And I just wish I could go back in time and make sure they word it a bit better. So they say, no, you can't revoke a license for anything other than bloody fire regulations. And so then we would not have had to deal with this bullshit from a BBFC we've had to deal with over the past 120, 110 years. Of which it's only the past 25 where they've been even remotely reasonable.
Well, sorry if my opinion on there was a little bit out of context, but it was just mainly because, you look at Britain as a whole and its class system, and it makes its facets in any way possible, be it through legislation or cultural attitudes to where they can classify something or whatnot. But the fire regulation thing, that's a health and safety measure, and that one I'm not going to sort of contend or contest with as far as I'm concerned. As far as I can tell you, the thing that's concerning me the most is not so much ratings on films or these stupid algorithms that Netflix uses. I can't stand algorithms like 16 plus, 12 plus. It doesn't really mean anything. But it's the banning of books at school districts in America, what they're doing, censoring. And probably even with, certain films that they put on these streaming services like French Connection and stuff, they were trying to censor it. But the book scandals occurring in America is the thing that's really getting under my skin.
Well, yeah, that's another thing altogether and everything. But at least the thing of books don't have age ratings, and apparently they do in Australia. And now they do, magazines or even newspapers. I remember I was 12. I bought a copy of a Daily Sport. Well, 2 different copies and everything. And of course, I didn't know if I was allowed to. Apparently, there was. But it's just, because they're not freaking restricted. It's only when you start to really look at it, it's like, why do age ratings are just kind of a weird anomaly that I don't even think should even exist.
Well, even
moot now because
with television, that Britain is the only country I'm aware of that doesn't have any sort of TV PG, TV 14 type system. So it's always throws me off a bit. So instead they got the watershed, which that's a bit of a vague test because sometimes you could record in DVR a lot of these TV shows and watch them at any time of the day. And not all children are alike. Some of them stay up as long as like 12 a.m. and watch some dodgy stuff that is on Channel 4 at night. I don't know. The laws regarding TV in the UK are a little bit strange. They make more sense to the US, but they're a little strange because they don't have some sort of uniform system.
The
It's just
watershed, from
Ofcom.
what I've read recently about the watershed, is basically as a compromise, because obviously there's the idea of, we've got to have a cut-off where we start showing stuff for adults that kids can't watch. But I think the suggestion was to make it like beyond 10, maybe even 11 o'clock. And all the adults in the world suddenly said, well, no, we would like to watch TV before we have to get up for work in the morning. So can we please make it early? And 9 o'clock was sort of the point they settled on. But it is a strange system that, considering how regulated our films are, the TV is essentially the same as music. It's either explicit or it's not, and that's decided by time and not anything. But I suppose the issue there is with transmission, of how you would regulate that. I don't know I know America has the age rating system. I don't know if there's any way they can actually police that, or if it's just essentially a recommendation, a sort of a warning at the beginning, like the BBFC cards are.
In the US, the law is a little bit peculiar in that the FCC dictates what you can air on public airways, like CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, and other affiliate stations. You can't show indecent material before like 10 or 11 at night. And then after that, anything goes. But it's often the advertisers that dictate what you can or cannot show on programs beforehand, which explains why you often hear F words being bleeped out. You can't show sort of full frontal nudity. Violence and drug use isn't really much of a problem, but each station has its own sort of criteria. And also, it's not entirely government mandated. The only thing that's government mandated is public airwaves and like PBS, which is their version of BBC. I know some of this because I'm partly American, and I had to watch with my mother Downton Abbey on PBS so many times, so don't remind me. But with cable and satellite, or like these paid TV stations like HBO and Showtime, there's no sort of explicit pre-vetting process by the government. The FCC controls, satellite communications and airways, but in terms of morality, that's more or less a decision based on the advertisers and the TV channels, whether they want to show it or not. I mean, Comedy Central got away with showing like Team America World Police or certain stand-up specials without cuts. But they do it in a clever sort of way, and they give like these preliminary warnings. I know on regular American TV you can't show TVMA programs, and TVMA is usually relegated to like your HBOs and Showtimes, and then obviously regular stuff like Rick and Morty. But they bleep out the swear, but it's TVMA. It's a bit of a long horse. I'm not going to go in on TV regulations in America because that's not my culture. My culture is more British. And I'm nostalgic for the watershed because you'll always hear that northern or Geordie bloke saying this. The following programme contains strong language and maybe a few scenes of a sexual nature. Tonight on Big Brother. Now, with strong language from the start, we're going to be showing, what's that? Shilpa Shetty being called a poppadom by Jade Goody. Tonight on 4. And they play some trip-hop song.
It's an excellent.
I know that. I know it might be a little bit before your time, but I know Rob can sort of relate to what I just made. It was a joke about them bloody announcers going on about, well, there's strong language from the start. It's like every blog is northern.
I remember. Yeah, I do remember. Well, I don't remember being northern. I do remember them always. I remember being quite a southern sound, saying the following program contains strong language. Or I don't remember being. Actually, what do I remember sounding like? I just remember saying now airing was we must warn this contains scenes of nudity or violence and everything. And of course, the film they've cut half it fucking out because they were like bowdlerizing it for TV. But yeah, I don't know if they do that anymore. But it doesn't mean any odds. I don't really watch broadcast television anymore. I stick to a streaming, or I might watch something on BBC iPlayer, but which of course won't be cut out anymore, so that won't be a problem. It was just annoying the way we've just cut shit out and everything. I mean, first watched Die Hard several times, but it was like recorded off ITV, and it was just like when I watched the actual proper version of video like a few years later, it was like I was watching a totally different film. It's like fucking hell, man! They probably neutered it. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to so what's the point of showing it anyway if it's so objectionable? Pick a different film. There's hundreds of thousands of films out there.
Well, I mean, they tried, showing certain select titles like The Idiots by Von Trier. What they had to do was cut out the scene where they had like the orgy because it had unsimulated sex, which legally on British television it's forbidden to show. That's the one stipulation I'm aware of that Ofcom sort of cracks on, as well as with advertising and stuff, which obviously work with the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority. You can't show certain ads before a certain time, like if they're distressing or have got overt sexual material, but nowadays they're cracking down on gender stereotypes and whatnot. Used to be a lot more straightforward, like if there was an ad that was for Durex, you could only see it at night. Or if there's a, like a Think ad, which I'm always get scared by Think and NSPCC ads. Don't remind me. They would often have to show them at night, or if it's one that is early in the day, it was discreet. No car crashes, no child abuse imagery, just a sad child looking sad on the camera. Give £2 a month. And then after that, it would be like the little Channel 4 logo and then an ad for your home insurance and some bloke saying, calm down dear, it's only a commercial. 0800 00 1066. Sorry, I'm getting up in a tangent. I'm having a nostalgia trip.
That was another massive flashback. I remember that. 1066.
Don't think I've seen June. I think I quite remember, but then again, do I remember that one? Oh, I have to think back. Oh,
Hastings Direct, it's for your home insurance. Like Lombard with the talking phone and direct line. So if
I think a lot of adverts now don't have the same. They had some really good sort of mascots and sort of interesting little characters for these adverts. Now I feel like a lot of that kind of joy has been taken out of them. They're a lot more corporate, for lack of a better word. Now it's all people smiling in offices.
I would say so too. I mean, if anything, the only one I really know is Mustache Man saying, "Go compare, go compare, go compare," and then
some of the best left in the past.
Tell me what the weasels say.
Oh, but Go
the
Compare
meerkats,
one. Oh, that's
the
annoying as
thistles.
fuck.